So welcome everybody to our first ever candidate interview. We're so excited that Brett Surplus sitting here with me is going to be our first candidate we interview for Kootenai County politics. The May election this year is super, super important, so we wanted to start something new, kick it up a notch, and allow you to get to know the candidates a little bit better. So this is Brett Surplus. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
And anyway, we are going to be interviewing all of the candidates for Kootenai County in the sheriff's race and the county commissioner's race. So again, we're so excited that Brett is our first guest. So with that, Brett, tell us, why are you running for office?
Well, funny you should ask. Being a born and raised native here, I've seen a lot of growth. I've seen a lot of changes. I think I'm 50 years old, and we go back. I'm 4 generations. My kids make 5.
Wow.
And looking as far as the track that we're on right now is very concerning. The growth is not being done responsibly, I feel, and it really makes me think as far as where we're going to be 5 years from now, what are we going to be 10 years from now? So when I really started paying attention to what was going on in the county commissioners, as far as things that were being done, spending, what's being approved, what's not being approved, I started seeing this pattern of, to me, it was wasteful spending. And the wasteful spending came from mistakes. And they are simple mistakes that normally people just wouldn't make those types of decisions. And so for me, I lost confidence in the current incumbent. And, after 5 years, whether you're doing it 1 year, you're doing it 5 years, I believe if you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. And not saying that everything's been incorrect, but when the bigger ones overshadow everything else, it's kind of hard to pass, So that is the reason. I want my kids to be able to still have the enjoyment of this place like I did growing up, and most people have. And I think for a lot of people who've moved here, they came here because of the idea of what this place is, right? As far as the feeling, how people are, the heritage of this place. And I think, we haven't had someone who comes from way back, in the old style days of Coeur d'Alene area, Kootenai County. And I think I've been molded from that, and I think it would be nice to be able to actually have that implemented into where we can really continue, and maybe try to bring some of that stuff back. That way we don't lose from where we were at, which is what attracted everybody to this place.
Correct.
So.
Yeah. Okay, so your next question is, what are your thoughts on growth and how you think it will impact Kootenai County in the next 10 years?
The growth, it wasn't something that we foreseen. It ended up, it was a political thing. I think with the way that the other states are and the governing that's happening, it gives people reason to leave. I wouldn't want to be there. It's, they're losing their rights. It's going crazy with the decisions, especially in the schools, and what they're not doing for children, what they're doing against our children. So people want that they want to get back to normal, right? And I think that's the biggest thing everybody's focusing on as far as whether it's pronouns or these different things. It's like, why not just get back to the word normal? Can we just all be normal? No matter which way you vote, be normal. And I think with the growth, we're at a bottleneck right now because our infrastructure is not at pace with what the growth rate is. And 70% of our workforce, of course, is construction. So we have issues between, we used to sit down and talk with city officials, cities with the county, and then let's get responsible about this as far as what we do. But the when we annex and then we're all of a sudden the cities are, they want to be able to get, the piece of the pie to be able to pay for the infrastructure, their roads and all the different things, then we're not all on the same page.
Right.
And I think that if we don't all get on the same page and say, okay, hey, once you build it, we can't ever go back. So we need to do this responsibly and look at, is this thing going to look like Phoenix, Arizona with all the other remaining cities? And is it going to take so many miles to get to a store because all you're going to be doing is going through nothing but houses? So we really need to sit down and have a discussion with the cities. Everybody needs to come together and go, okay, it's time before this gets out of control.
What are your top 3 priorities should you be elected?
Well, I mean, one of the ones that's, I think, is a bigger focus for everybody just because of the day of what we've got going on right now in the world. It's eventually everything bleeds. It ends up reaching you.
Yeah.
When we talk about as far as, the immigration stuff, and I mean, just the other day we had a guy who was arrested who was plotting to go shoot up the, some of the churches because he had sworn his allegiance to ISIS. These are things that it's just going to keep building. We've had more and more pursuits that have taken place. They've had, I think, 3 within the last month. So I think the can's been kicked down the road quite a bit as far as the law enforcement because we have so many holes. And, for taxpayers, they're paying for a service. And when you have, close to 100 job vacancies, I mean, basically that we've collected taxes for something that a service that was never given, right? So for me, we need to get to the level of, okay, let's fill the holes on our law enforcement, our jail, get our, prosecuting attorneys, get all of the stuff that we need for our public safety in order. Because we live in a place where it's the safest place in the world. Well, how do we have the safest place in the world when you've got so many holes in your law enforcement, and it's because of pay? They've kicked it down the road so much that we lose more money in training and hours with officers. I mean, in the last 10 years, I think that the estimated amount was $3.5 million that we lost. And if we're not matching, like, let's say Coeur d'Alene, for instance, to where we don't lose officers to go to court, to that, we're not only saving what we've put in for invested for training wise, but also the time and the experience and the knowledge that they have. So that's probably one of the biggest things, getting that can from stop being kicked down the road. I think there's been, between the county employees, there's a lot on between the clerks that are down at the sheriff's department versus the ones that are down at the county, and then of course with the sanitation, that they've lumped them as far as, well, they're just a county employee. And they want the division because they all have different hiring processes. And that, I think, is something that should have been done a long time ago to make it fair. You can't have 2 county clerks. One works at the sheriff's office and has to go through an extensive background like what deputies do, and then have somebody that's down in the county building that goes through a normal HR process and they have the same wage.
Yeah.
If you're doing deputy duties, then there needs to be some difference in there for those people, and that's just been one of those things that's been passed along for so long. I think the other thing, we don't know right now where we're going to be at after. I mean, the bill is still coming up on this justice building. We don't know what the final tally is going to be. I mean, we went from starting at 22 million to now at 34, but apparently they've pulled reserves from all the other departments, to try to, bring that down. But those are mistakes we can't have. And so we don't know, after this year as far as, okay, what's the cleanup, on these things? No different than our dispatch center. I mean, that went to shambles. We've got 9 dispatchers for 180,000 people, and it took $200,000 to fix it, and then all of a sudden we've got all these applications. I mean, that's not the a supervisor issue. That's a money issue because it took money to solve the problem, right? So with that now, because the fact that this can was kicked down the road for so long, we're paying now taxpayers over $100,000 for 2 mobile dispatchers for 3 months. Now, with this being a high-stress job, not everybody's going to make it onto, into the, on the radio instantaneously. They could need more training, and so then what ends up happening is now we're going to be paying, I think it's a roughly $37,000 a month additionally that we have these people here. That's an expensive mistake,
Yeah.
So that would be trying to get all of our public safety in order, I think, is probably the biggest priority, and then figuring out what we have for cost-wise to where we're not losing as much as we should be for mistakes. And then I think the other thing, we've got a real issue in the community development. You've got people that are waiting 7 months for building permits. I mean, it used to be where you'd have one commissioner who didn't want the building, go with the building permit thing. It was either permits or no permits, and it was mainly because of the fact that they go off of this international code thing. And of course, I think that one commissioner didn't like the wording of international, but it creates problems. And so I think realistically, we need a couple more inspectors to make the process go a lot quicker. And then I think at the same time, we also need contractors and everybody for what's expected for when it comes onto their plate, that way they're not having to kick it back and then throw it at the bottom of the pile. So I think everybody, we just need to, these are some of the bigger things that need to be taken care of to where make happiness for everybody.
Give us your own closing statement of what it is you want to say to the public, to the voter.
Well, I think it's my job to be, especially since I'm running, to bring people up to speed who don't pay attention to like the newspaper or social media and stuff as far as the things that have actually taken place, which has actually driven me to this spot to actually want to run. I mean, not needing this job, to me, I just felt compelled that I can either sit around and complain about it, or I could actually do something about it and try to do some good for the county, For the things that have actually taken place, I've discussed as far as the 911 center. For me, that it's not just about as far as the money issue portion of it, it's the safety issue of it. That when we only needed one more dispatcher to go to, we'd end up being in answering machines had they quit. You have dispatchers doing, 70 to 80 hours a week, and, they get fatigued. That is a danger to the public. And it's not their fault. They're trying to cover shifts. And I think, especially on officers, I mean, those are status checks that people are going to constantly need when they're out for service on a call, whether it be a traffic stop or they're at a DV, domestic violence situation or anything. If we don't have anybody there, who's going to be able to report the last known location? Who's going to check to see if they're okay? So that puts everybody in jeopardy, and unfortunately, that's happened under the incumbent's watch. There's things that I think as the board itself, like the Kootenai Electric building, for instance, not having a plan originally as far as what you were going to do with the building, and not, they purchased this building, and it's nothing against as far as Kootenai Electric. Kootenai Electric's a great company that they're family with everybody here in the community. But my thing about it is that any time that you're going to do a real estate transaction, this, being in real estate, you have to always cover your due diligence for the taxpayer. And I think a lot of those steps were missed. And it's one of those things that whether you're spending, $500,000 on a house, or if you're spending $5 million on a building, you need to make sure that you check things before you go and cut the check. This is no different when we go by our own personal house. We're going to do an inspection. We're going to make sure that, is there any added costs that we're going to have? What things can we expect for land-wise, radon? And, when the purchase was done, there was no inspections. And now it's like, okay, well, this deal should have been done a little bit differently. You could turn around and put a modest earnest money down and say, hey, we just want to do our due diligence. We want to have inspections done. We want to make sure that, when we have comp level of this is the value, that do we have anything that deducts? And, we allowed them to, stay there. The deal, part of the deal was that they stayed there. We never charged them any rent. I don't know many businesses that, get free rent. But that was part of the deal, so it's not as far as their fault, because it was a deal that, anybody's going to try to get the best deal for themselves. But when it comes to the taxpayers, and this being a taxpayers building, you have to cover, the taxpayer dollar. And I think now, with having to have a new roof be done, a new furnace, the thing has, gas was running in front of it, but it's never been put to the building, so now we're going to have those costs. There was a little bit of electrical issues that had to be taken care of, and then there's some remodeling that needs to be done, because per code wise, you need to have for wheelchair access and stuff like that, which isn't anything to do as far as with Kootenai Electric. That's just part as far as when you accept a building that you've got to have these things done. But we're looking at another $1 million, probably, roughly, approximately, that it's going to cost the taxpayers. So could the deal have been a little bit different had we went ahead and did our due diligence? With electrical companies, of course, they take transformers down and stuff like that, which PCBs come from the corrosion. Not saying that the whole building's that way, but when we had knowledge that was a potential, no matter how small the area, you still need to check and make sure. And it's not anything that, that's just part of being an electrical company. You're going to have those things. So if you're going to, take that building on, make sure you know everything about it before we go and we cut the check. And so I think those things, and especially when you have a board that's got two agents that should, know better to do those types of things as far as your due diligence, that's not covering the taxpayer. And so between that and, I think the one thing that also really kind of really set me off a little bit, and it's no matter how you got there, but they ended up, remember when they did the board to find out about the alternate form of government? Remember they put the panel together and they, wanted to check it out. Well, then of course it came back as, most likely that wouldn't be a good idea for the commissioners, because I'm, whether it's election time or not, but you've got a lot of people in the community saying no, because we want our ability to be able to vote for our sheriff or the assessor. But I think there was more of a thing there that it came down to, is that there's, people on the BOCC that either don't like an individual, they don't like a sheriff. So that was an attempt that was, started. And then we see this transition to, well, we have some, some discontent in the assessor's, position. So what did they do? They turned around and tried to cut his wages. He's an elected official. And then what ended up happening? We got sued. He won. Cost close to $15,000 in attorney fees. That is wasteful spending. And I think, to me, that's like showing that sign of alternate form of government is what I look at it. It's kind of like that. And I look at this pattern, it's like, okay, this is one of those things where what's the next item that's going to be attempted? Because you already tried it on the panel and now you've tried it on the wages. You see what I mean? So that to me it was what, and all three of them, you know, of course, the ones who approved for that to happen. So therefore, I think you're all three responsible, which means that with the first chair not, you know, returning, I think the third seat chairman needs to, you know, be replaced at that point. That's my feeling on it. So.
Okay, so I think that closes your final closing statement, and we appreciate you coming and sharing with us. We are really grateful that
Thanks for having me.
you wanted to participate, and we will be sharing your thoughts with the public.
I appreciate it. May
Thank you.
21st, make sure you vote.
That's right, you need to vote.